Just try to buy your mother a car from our common savings that we are saving for a mortgage. I will personally run over your mother in it later. Before we start, please subscribe and tell me what city you're watching from in the comments. Your support keeps these stories alive. I'm Latoya, born and raised on the south side of Atlanta, and for 2 years my life shrank down to a spreadsheet. Every Friday night, while our friends posted plates of lemon pepper wings and rooftop cocktails, I opened the savings app and watched the number inch forward like a cautious turtle crossing Auburn Avenue. $10 here from skipping lattes, $40 there from hemming my own work pants, a surprise $200 when the tax refund landed and I convinced myself I didn't need new tires just yet. Melvin and I called the account home like it was a person we were feeding. Every sacrifice a spoonful that would one day grow into a door we could unlock with our own key. That Friday, the number glowed like a sunrise. Just $10,000 left for the down payment. My chest did that small, hopeful ache it hasn't done since childhood Christmases. I had candles burning, peach, our luck scent, mac and cheese crisping on top, collards simmering low. The group text with my sisters pinged, a chorus of "almost there, sis," and strings of house emojis. Melvin came in humming, jacket smelling like rain and motor oil, his smile easy. He kissed my forehead the way he always does when the world feels gentle. For 5 minutes, it was perfect. Then his phone rang. Mama flashed across the screen. He put it on speaker because that's what he does. He loves to let our life spill into every room. Baby, Miss Loretta's voice rolled in, sweet tea poured over ice. You know I've been nursing that old Buick since your daddy passed. She coughed up on me today on I-285. Nearly died, Melvin. If a truck hadn't slowed. Lord. The mac and cheese still bubbled, but the room cooled. I twisted the ring on my finger, a thin gold band we promised to replace once home had walls. Are you okay, Miss Loretta? I asked. I'm shaken, sugar. Mechanic says it'll cost near what she's worth. Might be time for a new set of wheels. A sigh, feathery but heavy. I hate to ask. We'll talk, Mama, Melvin said, meeting my eyes like a man about to jump a fence he built himself. He ended the call and didn't sit down. He didn't breathe. Toya, he said, I'm going to pull the money. Not all. Just enough to get her a safe car. You know how I feel about Mama on that highway. I stared at him, then at the candles, then at the number 10,000, still bright on my phone. Inside me, a small room, where I keep belief, tilted. We agreed, I said, slow and careful, like unscrewing a jar you might reuse. We said home is sacred. We said we'd let nothing break it. It's my mother, he answered, as if those words formed a key that could open anything. She could have died. She could have, but she didn't. And her Buick passed inspection last month. Calm is a suit I wear when the world throws grease. This isn't an emergency, baby. This is a want. Something flared across his face. Guilt, then pride, then stubbornness hardening into a mask. I can't sleep knowing she's out there in a tin can. I'm her son. And I'm your wife, I said, building your future with coupons and thread. Our home is not a spare wallet for a sudden whim. He flinched, his jaw set. I'm calling her back, he said like a dare. He stepped into the hallway and dialed, loud enough for the whole block to hear. Mama, she don't get it. She thinks a car's a luxury. She's saying no, like you ain't almost died. You hear this? Cold-hearted. Cold-hearted. The word says more about the speaker than the target, but still, I felt it slice, thin and precise. I kept stirring the collards. I texted my sisters, just pray. Minutes later, Miss Loretta called me herself. "Latoya, baby," she began, smooth as butter melting on cornbread. "I wouldn't bother you if it weren't life and death. That Buick rattles like bones in a bucket. I almost lost control. I know y'all been saving, but God will provide another way for the house. He gave you 2 hands, 2 good jobs, and time." "God also provides wisdom," I said, steady. "Wisdom to know the difference between need and want. Your car passed inspection. What happened today?" Silence answered. "A scare is not a sign," I continued gently. "It's a reminder to plan. We can help with maintenance, but stripping the down payment, that's not stewardship. That's sacrifice with no altar." Her sugar turned to lemon. "So you'd let your husband's mother drive a death trap?" "I'd let our marriage survive," I said. When the call ended, the candles had burned low, and the mac and cheese toppled into overdone. Melvin came back in, eyes not meeting mine, a storm gathering under his skin. He put the plates out anyway. He sat across from me and swallowed one forkful like a man chewing through a decision. "Latoya," he said finally, "if I don't take care of Mama, what kind of son am I?" I folded my napkin and felt the room tilt back into place. "I'm about to show you what kind of wife I am," I said, rising for the laptop. If only he knew what I was about to do next. Would he have picked a different fight? I didn't slam the laptop shut. I didn't raise my voice. Calm was the weapon I had sharpened in my years with Melvin, because I learned early that volume never carried the point. Precision did. My fingers moved over the keys like I was counting rosary beads, steady and deliberate, logging into our joint account. $7,500 slid into my personal savings with one clean transfer. The confirmation email pinged almost instantly. I pushed the rest, every cent of what remained, back into our joint account. It felt like slicing a loaf of bread and setting his half at his place, still warm but no longer mine. When I turned to face him, his eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" "I'm giving you exactly what you want," I said. My voice was even, but the air in the kitchen had gone brittle. "There's your money, Melvin. Go buy your mama that car. Wrap it in a bow if you want. But my home, my life, they're no longer yours to spend." He laughed, but it was the hollow kind, like a preacher without scripture. "You're being ridiculous." I leaned against the counter, folding my arms. Ridiculous is thinking we can build a future when the second someone cries, "Help," you cash out our dreams without a conversation. Ridiculous is letting your mother think I'm the villain because you can't tell her no. He ran a hand down his face, muttering something about blood before vows, a phrase that sounded rehearsed, like he'd been holding it in for just such a moment. "I'm your wife," I reminded him, each word a nail in the coffin I was building for us. "We've lived lean, scraped, sacrificed for 2 years. I said no because I want us to stand in our own living room one day, not because I hate your mother, but you—" I shook my head. "You'd burn the blueprints for a quick thank you." For a moment, I thought he might say he understood. His shoulders dropped, his mouth opened. Then the phone buzzed again, Mama Loretta. He turned away to answer, his voice soft, almost boyish. "Yeah, Mama, it's handled." Handled. As if my refusal, my reasons, my dignity were all just background noise to the real story he was telling her. I didn't wait for him to hang up. I went to the hall closet, pulled out his duffel bag, and set it on the kitchen table between us. The zipper teeth grinned up at him. "By morning," I said, "you'll be at her place. That way you can check the oil yourself and sleep knowing she's safe." His face twisted. Not from shock, but from the dawning awareness that I wasn't bluffing. He glanced at the laptop, at the half-empty account, and I saw the calculation begin, how much he'd lost in a single night. The mac and cheese sat untouched. The collards cooled. Outside, the rain eased and the streetlights painted long, thin shadows through the blinds. He didn't say another word. And I didn't either, because some silences are not empty. They're full of every promise just broken. Morning in Atlanta doesn't ease you into the day, it pushes. Even in early spring, the sun barges through the blinds before you're ready, and the street below hums with the rush of buses, kids hollering on their way to school, and the low growl of delivery trucks. I woke to that noise, not to the sound of Melvin in the shower or clanging around in the kitchen like he usually did when he was trying to make peace after a fight. The apartment was too still. I sat up in bed and listened. No running water, no soft R&B spilling from his phone, no smell of coffee, just the faint scent of yesterday's peach candles now burned down to puddles of wax. I knew before my feet hit the carpet that the duffel bag was gone. When I stepped into the kitchen, it was. Along with his coat from the hook by the door, his sneakers from under the table, and the umbrella he swore was lucky. In their place sat a note written in his rushed, slightly leaning handwriting. "Latoya, I can't believe you'd end us over this. Mama needs me. I'll be at her place. We can talk when you've cooled off." He'd underlined cooled off twice, like I was a summer storm that would pass in a few hours if left alone. I folded the note once, then again, and dropped it straight into the trash. Cooling off wasn't on my to-do list. I poured myself a glass of water and scrolled through my phone. 3 missed calls from Miss Loretta. Ignored. 1 text from my sister, Shonda. "Girl, you good?" Saw Melvin's post about living with folks who don't understand family. My jaw tightened. Public pity play already. He hadn't wasted a minute before turning this into a stage production where he was the dutiful son and I was the cold-hearted wife. I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I opened our savings account app again, stared at the split numbers, my half safe, his half ripe for whatever deal Loretta would talk him into. 10 minutes of sipping water and counting breaths later, my phone lit up with another incoming call. Her again. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Latoya," she began, her voice pitched somewhere between Sunday service sweet and Monday morning scold. "I hear you put Melvin out." "Over a car? Baby, that's not right." I took a slow breath. "Miss Loretta, I didn't put him out over a car. I asked him to protect the life we've been building. He chose not to." There was a pause, like she'd been expecting me to crumble into apology. "You know he's my only child. Since his daddy passed, it's just been me and him. I thought you understood that bond." "I do," I said evenly, "but he's also my husband. That bond should matter too. We worked for 2 years for that money. That was our home in that account, and you're asking him to trade it for leather seats and a warranty." "My Buick's a death trap," she shot back. "And yet it passed inspection," I reminded her. "You told him you almost died yesterday, but I suspect what you mean is you got scared when it made a noise. That's not the same thing as need." Her breath hissed in the receiver. "You always were headstrong." "And you always knew he couldn't say no to you," I replied. "So I said it for him. Now you have him back under your roof. You can celebrate however you like." Her tone shifted to something sharp and cold. "You'll regret sending him away, Latoya." The line went dead before I could answer. I set the phone down and let the quiet settle in again. Regret wasn't the right word for what I felt. It was grief, but not the kind that begged for return. It was the kind that made space, painful space, for something sturdier to grow. Around noon, Shonda came over, her arms full of takeout bags. "Thought you could use some ribs," she said, pushing past me into the kitchen. "And before you ask, yes, I saw the Facebook mess. He's acting like you threw his mama into the street barefoot." I laughed, but it was humorless. That's the story he's selling. And folks will buy it because it's easier than admitting he chose her wants over our needs. We ate at the table where his duffel had been, the silence between bites heavy but not uncomfortable. Shonda listened as I told her the whole thing, from the peach candles to the duffel bag, from Loretta's death trap to her last icy warning. When I finished, she shook her head. You did right. But you know they're gonna spin this. Next thing, folks will be whispering that you ran off with the money or that you've been planning to leave him. I know, I said, and I can't control that. But I can control who has keys to my front door. Outside, the sun slipped behind a cloud and the apartment dimmed. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't thinking about paint colors or floor plans. I was thinking about locks and who I'd let cross them in the future. 2 days passed before I heard anything about Melvin that didn't come from his own online pity parade. I wasn't looking for updates, but Atlanta has a way of delivering gossip to your doorstep even when you've bolted it shut. It came through Shonda's friend Kim, who worked the early shift at the Waffle House near Miss Loretta's neighborhood. Girl, Kim said over the phone, her voice fizzing with that mix of disbelief and delight only fresh drama can give. Your man was in here with his mama, talking loud enough for the whole place to get the tea. I didn't ask her to spill. Kim wasn't the type to wait for permission. He told her you took all the money, didn't even mention you left him half. Said you ran off with the dream and left him homeless. I closed my eyes. That was the story now. I wasn't the woman who'd protected our savings. I was the woman who'd stolen it. Kim kept going. And honey, his mama's not helping. She was saying, see, I told you she wasn't cut out for family. I thanked her for letting me know, hung up, and sat for a long minute in the living room, the late afternoon sun painting gold stripes across the floor. There's a special kind of ache in hearing your name dragged by people who once sat at your table laughing over cornbread. By Saturday, it wasn't just whispers. My cousin Renee texted, "Heard you kicked Melvin out for good. Folks saying you got another man lined up." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard before deciding not to answer. Explaining myself to people who only wanted a juicier version of the truth felt like bailing water from a boat they were already drilling holes in. Instead, I cleaned. Scrubbed the counters until they gleamed, vacuumed every corner, rearranged the living room furniture just to see how the light hit differently. Each shift in the space felt like a small reclaiming. By evening, I had the place spotless, and I was just settling down with a cup of tea when my phone rang again. It was Melvin. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. "LaToya," he began, his tone that same mixture of wounded and righteous. "You've made your point, but Mama's in a bind. The dealership says the car she wants is only available for the next few days, and..." I cut him off. "And you want me to hand over my half to make it happen?" "No." "It's not about the car anymore," he insisted. "It's about showing her we're united." "We're not united, Melvin," I said softly. "You broke that the moment you turned our future into a bargaining chip, and now you're asking me to co-sign the loss." He sighed heavily. "You're cold, LaToya. I never thought you could be this cold." "I'm not cold," I replied. "I'm done being the only one here willing to keep the fire going." There was a long silence then. "You'll regret this." "You keep saying that," I said, my voice level. "But I think the regret's going to be yours when you realize a new car can't drive you back to what we had." I ended the call before he could answer. That night, as I climbed into bed, my phone buzzed with one last message from an unknown number. "Hope you're happy. You ruined a good man. No name, no context." But I didn't need either. The words felt less like a threat and more like a reminder of just how far the story had twisted outside my walls. I put the phone on silent, turned off the light, and lay there in the dark, the quiet of the apartment now something I guarded as fiercely as I once guarded that down payment. By the third week, the silence between Melvin and me had turned into something solid. We hadn't spoken since that last call, but news about him drifted in like humidity, impossible to keep out. It came from unexpected places. A cashier at the grocery store who knew Loretta from church, an old neighbor who ran into him at the gas station. The story was shifting. At first, Melvin had painted himself as the victim of my selfishness, but as days turned into weeks, cracks began to show in his new arrangement. Word was, Loretta had a list for him: yard work, home repairs, errands, and she expected it done on her schedule. He'd traded our quiet apartment for a twin bed in his old room right under the window that faced the alley where the trash truck banged through at 5 a.m. Shonda brought me the juiciest update over brunch one Saturday. Girl, he's already complaining to folks that his mama's on him about everything. Says she's always reminding him how much she's done for him since his daddy died. You know that line. I raised you alone. I smiled into my coffee, not out of spite, but because I'd heard that same refrain often enough to know it was both love and leverage. That afternoon, I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed with a message from an old co-worker of Melvin's. He came by the shop today asking if we had any part-time hours. Looked rough. Rough. That word lingered. Melvin had always been proud of looking put together, even when money was tight. He ironed his shirts, polished his shoes, kept his hair neat. If he was walking into places looking rough, the shine was wearing off, in more ways than one. 2 days later, I got an unmarked envelope in the mail. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a printed email chain between Loretta and one of her cousins. The cousin had forwarded it to Shonda, who slipped it into my mailbox without a return address to avoid drama. In the email, Loretta wrote, "He's been moping around here, and I told him straight. Maybe if he'd picked a wife who wasn't so high and mighty, he'd still have his home. But maybe it's for the best. Now he can help me instead." I sat with that for a long while. The line that hit hardest wasn't the insult, it was the "now he can help me instead." It was the clearest truth yet. This had never been about a car. It was about keeping him under her roof, in her orbit, where she could rely on him the way she always had before me. That night, I dreamed of the house we'd planned. Not the blueprint in my head, but a warm, finished home, painted walls, the smell of peach cobbler in the oven, laughter echoing in the halls. Only in the dream the front door stayed locked. No one could come in unless I opened it. When I woke, the first thing I did was check my savings account. My half was still there, untouched. And for the first time since this began, I felt a strange kind of peace. Not joy, not yet, but the steadiness that comes from knowing you're not adrift, you're anchored, even if the shore you imagined is gone. Later that week, I ran into one of Loretta's neighbors at the market. She leaned in close, her voice low. "You didn't hear it from me, but your mother-in-law is already tired. Says Melvin eats through groceries like a teenager and leaves wet towels on the floor. I think she thought she was getting her sweet boy back, but she got a grown man with bills and no plan." I thanked her, then walked out into the sunlight feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Because here's the thing, I didn't need to punish Melvin. Life and Loretta were doing that work for me. It was a Thursday evening when the knock came. Not the quick, polite tap of a neighbor, but the heavy, deliberate thump of someone rehearsing their courage on my doorstep. I knew before I opened the door. Melvin stood there, hands in his jacket pockets, shoulders rounded against the chill. He looked smaller, not physically. He was still the same broad-shouldered man I'd married, but his confidence, that easy swagger he carried like a birthright, was gone. "Hey, Toya," he said, his voice low. I didn't step aside. "What do you need, Melvin?" His eyes flicked past me into the apartment, landing on the framed photo still hanging on the wall. Him in his graduation cap, the two of us on our first vacation, that silly selfie from the night we signed the lease. His jaw tightened. "Can I come in?" "Just to talk." I hesitated. A month ago, I would have moved without thinking. Tonight I stood still. "You can talk here." He nodded, swallowing whatever pride he had left. "Things at Mama's, they're not what I thought." I crossed my arms. "You thought it was going to be what? Easy? A hero's welcome?" His mouth curved in a humorless half-smile. "Something like that." He looked down at his shoes. "She's on me from sunup to sundown. Wants the yard perfect, the gutters cleared, drives me to 3 different stores for 1 loaf of bread, and the car—" I raised an eyebrow. "She get it?" "Oh, yeah," he said quickly. "Bright red sedan, paid cash. First week she parked it at church and told everybody her baby made it happen, didn't even mention you." "That's because I didn't," I replied. He flinched but pressed on. "I thought once she got the car, things would settle. But it's like she's got me on a leash, and she's talking about me quitting my job to help around the house more. And this is my problem because—" I let the words hang there. He shifted uncomfortably. "Because I miss you, Toya. I miss us. I know I messed up. I shouldn't have gone behind your back. But you don't just throw away—" I cut him off. "You threw it away when you decided my voice didn't matter. When you chose being the perfect son over being a real partner." His eyes searched mine, looking for the softness he used to find there. "So that's it? No second chance?" I thought about the empty bed, the quiet mornings, the weight that had lifted from my chest even in the middle of all this gossip. I thought about the house we'd almost built and how it had turned out to be more fragile than I'd ever imagined. "I'm not saying never," I said finally, "but I'm not putting my life back on the table just because yours got uncomfortable." He nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting that answer but still hoping for another. "I guess I deserved that." "You did," I said. "And Melvin, don't come back here until you're ready to show up for both of us, not just for her." For a second, he just stood there like he might say something else. But then he turned, hands still buried in his pockets, and walked down the hall. His steps echoed, fading until there was nothing but the hum of the streetlights. I closed the door and leaned against it, my palms flat against the wood. There was no rush of triumph, no sweet satisfaction, just a quiet certainty. I'd done what needed to be done. This silence after he left felt different this time, not the brittle quiet of a fight, but the steady hum of a space that belonged entirely to me. And I wasn't ready to give that up. The call came on a rainy Sunday afternoon, just as I was pulling sweet potato biscuits out of the oven. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to answer. "LaToya? This is Sister Pauline from New Hope Baptist." Her voice was brisk but careful, the way people speak when they're about to deliver news they know will land heavy. "I don't mean to meddle, but I thought you should know Melvin. And Miss Loretta had quite a scene in the church parking lot today." I set the pan down slowly. "What kind of scene?" "Well," she said, lowering her voice like the phone line might carry gossip back to the source, "she was fussing at him something fierce, Said he's ungrateful, lazy, and eaten her out of house and home. He shouted back that she treats him like a boy and that the car wasn't worth all this. Folks were staring. Deacon Harris had to walk between them. I thanked her and hung up, picturing it. Melvin, in his Sunday best, squaring off with Loretta in the drizzle, their voices ricocheting off polished hoods in the parking lot. It was a scene I'd never witnessed, but had always known could happen. Two people who loved each other fiercely but played tug of war with that love until the rope frayed. That evening, as rain slid down the windows, Shonda stopped by with a bag of groceries and a raised eyebrow. So, your ex-something had a meltdown in public. I heard. She pulled out a carton of eggs and set it on the counter. Word is, he walked off and didn't come back for the rest of service. Left her there to drive herself home in that shiny red car. That mental image, Loretta gripping the wheel, lips tight, her victory passenger seat empty, stayed with me for the rest of the night. 3 days later, I got another call, this time from Melvin himself. Toya, he said without preamble, I can't do this anymore. Mama's impossible. She's mad I won't quit my job, mad I don't run every errand she thinks up, mad I don't spend every evening at her kitchen table. I swear she wants me to be 13 again. And now you know how I felt, I said, when you made decisions like I wasn't standing right there. He sighed. I was wrong. I see that now. I thought I was protecting her. But she doesn't want protection. She wants control. That's not news to me, I said. It's just new to you. Silence crackled over the line before he said, Can I come over? Just to talk about where we go from here? I hesitated, my eyes falling on the neat stack of mail on my table, the potted plant by the window thriving in the calm. My life had grown roots again without him in it. Not yet, I said. You need to figure out where you stand without leaning on me, or her. Until then, there's nowhere to go from here. He didn't argue, just murmured, All right, and hung up. That night, I lay in bed listening to the rain's soft percussion on the roof, thinking about the house we almost had. Not the physical one. We could still buy 4 walls and a roof someday if I chose, but the house we'd imagined in our hearts. That one had already collapsed, brick by brick, the moment trust left its foundation. And I knew then, no matter what Melvin decided next, I wasn't rebuilding on that same cracked ground. It was early on a Saturday when my phone buzzed with a string of texts from Shonda. Girl, you're not gonna believe this. Melvin moved out of Loretta's last night. Big fight, like dishes slamming, neighbors calling kind of fight. I called her immediately and she didn't even say hello. So apparently, Loretta told him she was tired of feeding a grown man who brings nothing to the table but complaints. He told her if it weren't for him, she'd still be driving that death trap Buick. She said at least the Buick didn't sleep till noon. I could picture it, the two of them circling each other in that cramped kitchen, the red sedan parked out front like a trophy neither of them really wanted anymore. Where is he now? I asked. Don't know, Shonda said, but he's not at her place. Loretta told folks at Bible study she changed the locks. That detail sat with me. She'd shut him out with the same finality I had. Later that afternoon, there was a knock on my door. This time, I didn't even need to look through the peephole. I knew that rhythm. When I opened it, Melvin stood there in a wrinkled t-shirt holding a plastic grocery bag with what looked like clothes shoved inside. His eyes were tired, his voice low. She kicked me out, Toya. I heard. He nodded once, like there was nothing else to say. Then, can I stay here a few nights? Just until I figure things out? I leaned against the doorframe, studying him. You have friends, you have family, you have options that aren't here. Those options aren't you, he said. That's the point, I replied. He swallowed hard. I know I blew it. I put her before us and now I've got neither. I thought I was doing the right thing, but you were doing the easy thing, I cut in. The thing that kept you from having to tell her no, and now you know the cost. His eyes dropped to the floor. So that's it? That's it, I said softly. I'm not your backup plan, Melvin. I'm not the place you come to when the other door closes. I'm the woman you should have chosen to stand with from the start. He nodded slowly, stepping back into the hallway. I'm sorry, Toya. For all of it. I hope you mean that, I said, because the next woman you're with deserves to hear it before she's in my shoes. We stood there for a moment longer. Him on the outside, me on the inside before he turned and walked away, the sound of his steps fading just like they had the last time. I closed the door and pressed my back to it, not from sadness this time, but from relief. The apartment was quiet again, the air still. My home, my peace, my future, safe in my own hands. I glanced at the savings app on my phone. My half of the down payment sat untouched, waiting. Not for him, not for us as we once were, but for the life I'd build on my own terms. Because I'd learned something through all of this. A home isn't just walls and a roof. It's the space where your voice matters, your choices stand, and no one can spend your dreams without your consent. And that was something I was never going to give away again. Atlanta in early summer has a way of pressing itself into your skin, humid, relentless, and impossible to ignore. By June, the air carried that faint metallic tang that comes before a storm, and I found myself watching the sky more often than usual. It wasn't the weather I was keeping track of, though. It was my own life, waiting to see if the clouds I'd lived under for months would finally clear. In the weeks after Melvin walked away for the last time, the quiet in my apartment became something I looked forward to. At first, it was jarring. The absence of his keys hitting the counter, the shuffle of his feet in the hallway, the muffled phone calls to his mama. But slowly, that emptiness began to fill with something warmer. The sound of my own music in the morning, the clink of one coffee mug instead of two, the hum of the fan while I read on the couch in the evenings. People asked, of course, at work, at church, even in the grocery store line. You two working things out? He coming back soon? Y'all too good together to be apart. They meant well, most of them. But what they didn't understand was that too good together had been a mirage. The truth was simpler. I'd been giving more than I could afford, and he'd been spending more than he'd earned, not just in money, but in trust. Shonda stayed close through it all. One Saturday, she showed up with 2 paint cans and said, "If you're not moving yet, you might as well make this place feel new." We spent the whole afternoon painting the living room a shade called Morning Toast, laughing at how the name sounded like a bad R&B album. When we finished, the wall seemed to catch the late sunlight differently, as if even the space was glad for a fresh start. I heard about Melvin in fragments. He'd been staying with an old friend from high school, picking up odd jobs, talking less about me and more about finding his footing. Loretta, for her part, wasn't shy about telling anyone who'd listen that she'd done her part and couldn't be expected to babysit a grown man. The red sedan still sat in her driveway, polished to a shine every Sunday morning. It was almost poetic, this shiny, expensive symbol of the choice that had cost Melvin his marriage, now just another car on the block. One evening in July, I ran into Sister Pauline outside the corner store. She gave me that knowing look older women have when they've been around enough broken hearts to recognize the signs of a healed one. You're walking lighter, she said. I am, I admitted. It took a while, but I am. She nodded. Sometimes God closes the door so softly you don't realize it's locked until you try the handle again, and by then you don't even want to go back inside. Her words sat with me all the way home. They felt true in a way that didn't sting, just confirmed what I'd been learning day by day. Peace isn't always loud, but it's always clear. By August, I'd met with a realtor, not to buy yet, but to start looking. The house I'd eventually choose might be smaller than what Melvin and I had dreamed of, maybe even on a different side of town, but it would be mine. Every wall color, every piece of furniture, every plant by the window would be chosen because it made me feel at home, not because it fit someone else's vision. One Sunday, as I sat in my newly painted living room with a cup of tea, I scrolled past an old photo on my phone. Me and Melvin holding hands in front of a model home, grinning like we'd already moved in. For a moment, I let myself feel the echo of that day. The hope, the plans, the belief that we were building something unshakable. Then I set the phone down and looked around at the space I'd shaped for myself. It wasn't the house from the photo, but it was solid. It was mine. The storm clouds in my life hadn't cleared all at once. They'd thinned slowly, letting light in piece by piece. And in that light, I could finally see what I'd been missing. Not just a partner who would stand beside me, but the ability to stand on my own without apology. The money in my savings account was still there, growing little by little, but the real wealth was the quiet certainty I carried now, the knowledge that my dreams didn't have to be compromised to be shared, and if one day I chose to share them again, it would be with someone who understood that a down payment isn't just dollars in a bank. It's a promise I'd never let anyone break again.